Hey there. So I've made a little bit of an adjustment to Edric again. I went ahead and I actually cut a land and went to 31 lands. Um, I had at one time 6 islands, the 2 snow and the 3 standard basics. So I went ahead and I also had, I think, 2 forests and a snow covered forest. I went ahead and took the snow forest out and put in Temple of Mystery. And then I went ahead and took out one of the lands and put in Solemn Simulacrum in its spot. And I like Solemn because I like the interaction between Solemn and Birthing Pod. I like the interaction with all this colorless mana. It's also a creature that you don't really want to block very much. So it can be kind of a situation with Edric where blocking will give me a card, not blocking will give me a card. So that's kind of nice with Solemn Simulacrum. Anyway, oh, and then the other thing with that card is that it's very nice to metamorph and copy artifact on that guy as well. The other thing I took out was I took out a temporarily at least. I took out Tradewind Rider. I love the card. It is a great card, amazing card. Unfortunately, I wanted to put even more mana into the deck, and Tradewind was the card that it doesn't do anything on its own. Of course, um, a lot of these cards are like that, equipment's like that, but when it gets going, it's strong, but it has a little bit of a tussle with Edric in the sense that Tradewind wants to tap creatures, Edric wants you to tap them to attack. So out of what was in here, I felt like that was the easiest pull, although it certainly was not an easy decision. I put in Simic Signet. The main thing is, as bad as Signet seems in this deck, because I've gone very artifact heavy and now I've got Solemn and Signet in here as well. I've got 2 more targets for Mishra's Workshop. Another way to abuse Ancient Tomb. Signet's another card that goes great with an early Mox, Crypt, Soul Ring, or Diamond draw, even potentially a Mana Vault draw where you vault into Signet and then use the mana to cast something like Priest or Bloom Tender or Sylvan. So it's just it fits, or even heck, Zenith. It fits the curve of the deck very well, and helps out with one of the ways. Pretty much the only way I've lost with this deck has been for my opponents to uh, against Mox Nix. We went 1-1 where I stopped him from. He's playing his combo deck, and I stopped him from comboing off. And then in second game, he just Dark Ritualed and ad nauseum, and I watched him. I was helplessly watching him kill me on turn 3. There's nothing I could do about that. So, other than that, the only time this deck has lost has been Mana Screw, and it's been generally either done to me by the opponent, rarely, or more frequently, because I just didn't draw enough mana, which is insane because this deck is almost all mana. But even with as much as it has, I felt like it didn't have enough, so I upped the count. The one card that I don't have that I'd really like, that's temporarily not in here, I don't have Wood Elves, and I do like the card a lot, as well as the little Sylvan Ranger that fetches lands, but or even Sylvan Scrying to tutor for lands. But I had to pick kind of the best cards for doing that effect, and of the Sylvan Ranger, Wood Elves, Sylvan Scrying, and Solemn Simulacrum, it seemed like Solemn makes the most sense in the deck, mainly because I've pushed it in the direction of colorless mana, and it makes a workshop better, which is very important if you're going to play shop. You need to have reasons to play it. So that's all I have on that, and I'll scroll down so you can see the land base here, which lands are being used. I think it's a little easier to view this way. So go ahead and scroll back up. Hopefully you got a look. And now we'll run through some games, which should be interesting. So today I just played a few, so we'll play these games out, and then I will try to backtrack to yesterday and see if I can find. There's a couple of games that I may actually do a second video. There were a few interesting games yesterday, but the only hesitation I have to showing yesterday's games is that I didn't have all the changes in place, so some of the games, in fact most of them, don't have the current configuration, so it's slightly off still. All right, so game one today was against Kemba Ka Regent, and I have an amazing hand, obviously, so I'm going to keep this. He's going first. I would say I have no chance to lose going if I had been going first. But going second, my opponent could potentially disrupt me. When he plays Oreskos Explorer, which lets him get in a planes and put it into his hand if I have more lands than him, when he wastes his turn 2 on this guy, a grizzly bear with no abilities because he wasn't patient, I realize this is not going to be a very challenging game, but I will still try to take it seriously just so I don't get blown out by my own arrogance. But it's definitely a tell. So I go ahead and I thought about, there was some thought to holding Green Sun Zenith because a really big Zenith here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 mana. So a Zenith for 4 here. Potentially I could regrow. I could have regrown Delta and then waited a turn and the Zenith for 5. If he were to play an artifact, I could play Reclamation Sage and Priest would then produce extra mana. I could Zenith for 6 on the next turn. 5 is all I need though because it's the top end. So a Zenith for a Drained Hermit and then Opposition Lock seemed really good, but Opposition's but I felt like it made more sense to develop as quickly as I could here and tutor up that Arbor than to worry about that because I've got enough creatures already, plus remember my commander as well, to make opposition good. So I just want to get more mana and get it on the table as fast as I can. So I go ahead and cast Edric before using Priest. I then tap the Priest and the Coast and play Glen Elendris. I didn't get to play a land for the turn. But the nice thing here is if he wraths, the Glen will pop back. I'll get to regrow lands and hit my land drops and carry on with my game plan. He just plays bad equipment, so this isn't much of a challenge. He doesn't attack. Really couldn't get too much easier for me. So I go ahead and Reclamation Sage his equipment, mainly because not so much interaction with his commander, mainly because it charges the Priest, but you know, there is his commander as well to consider. Eternal Witness up a land, and from there I'm able to fetch and fetch. I fetch a land, and with the one floating, I go ahead and regrowth the fetch land again because I want to hit a land next turn, and next turn will be the end of the game, I think. But I want to sit on Glenelendra with a blue because other than some board clear or some sort of destroy all non-white creatures or something like that, or maybe even a really good piece of equipment, Umezawa's Jite perhaps, I'm not worried about what my opponent could be doing here. So I'm not worried about any creature he could be playing here. So, and while I'm at it, I go ahead and just draw myself a card. My opponent does very little. So Steel Shaper Apprentice is kind of interesting. It tutors for equipment, but it doesn't put it into play like the 5 mana creature whose tap has vigilance and you spend a white and a colorless to fetch an equipment directly to play. This creature's not like that. It goes to his hand and he has to bounce the creature to his hand. This is definitely not a threat to me even slightly. So putting equipment in his hand that he can't cast is not going to help him much. So the top decked Garruk is really nice because it just allows me to flow through my turn even smoother. Go ahead and grab a card here. And then we start Opposition Lock with 2 counterspells backing it up. Starting by tapping all his lands. I figured he'd tap Steel Shaper in response, but he doesn't. So I tap Kemba before he can attack, and so he sends in 3 guys at Garruk. It's not enough to kill it. I wasn't even slightly worried about that. The main thing is Garruk will live, and my opponent will not get another opportunity to do something similar. So I go ahead and slam. So at this point, I drew Drained Hermit, but whether or not I drew Drained Hermit or Mystical Tutor or Natural Order or some other way to go get Drained Hermit or a Green Sun Zenith, for example, whatever, I figured drawing more cards here with enough guys to lock down his 3 attackers and then hiding behind 2 counter spells with only 4 mana over there means that it's better to attack, well, 2 counter spells plus a Glen. So it's better to attack here with more guys than it would have been to not to attack. Now, I'm not sure why I sent Arbor and not Edric here. I think that was a mistake. Should have attacked with my non-mana producing creatures. But at any rate, I get a workshop. I get a shop into Lantern. play a Mana Vault, untap some. Oh, that's right. That's why I attacked with the Arbor. It was because I had Garrick, and I had planned to use Garrick to untap the Arbor. So I forgot about my own play. Anyway, and then from there, Priest taps for 4, and I go ahead and just use the Workshop for the last mana. Play Deranged Hermit. I'm sitting on counters galore and tons of tapping action. So I go ahead and just hold down the Z key so that I don't pass priority, and then I just tap. Once I get priority from my opponent, I just start adding opposition triggers to the stack, resolve them because I wasn't sure which lands I had targeted yet, and then after they all resolve, I tap the last land there. And he does nothing. And before I can pay Echo on Deranged Hermit, which I clearly would have done in this position, my opponent gives up. Of course, if he hadn't given up in 2 turns, Garrick does overrun and he dies. So I don't even really have to do much here. I'm going to swing and grab some more cards. But other than that, I'm pretty much just going to sit pat, plus up Garrick twice, and kill him in 2 turns. So he scoops it up. So that was a very straightforward win, which is to be expected with that commander and the cards that he had selected. So this guy, however, is playing Kador, and Kador can be a threat. I've got a pretty interesting hand. I decide I'm going to keep it. It's a little risky because I have to. I feel like the right play is to lead off with the Arbor and then follow up with Mox. And so that gives him an opportunity to Swords of Plowshares the Arbor or something like that. But then again, if I draw a good removal card, well, there's a couple things. One, if I draw a good removal card out early, I'm probably okay with that. Because then he won't have one later, although it does put me in a pinch if I don't find land before the next couple turns. But 2, it also, there's a card he can't use. He cannot play Path to exile here because it's defeats the purpose, right? But instead of playing removal, my opponent just plays the trusty Soul Ring. So I go ahead and Wooded Foothills into Chop. I Chrome Mox away Remand because I've got plans for Mana Producer, and Birthing Pod Madness. So I'm not going to want to pitch anything other than Remand, and I'm probably not going to sit on the Remand because my draw's so strong. So I draw Natural Order with some natural luck there, which is pretty awesome. So I go ahead and cast myself a Trinket Mage into a Mana Crypt. Play the Crypt. Crypt myself into Birthing Pod. And pod away the Trinket Mage and go get myself... Thought about Glen Elendra, but I figured if he's got a sweeper here, then I will want to be in the strongest possible position. So if he sweeps the board with the Solemn out, I've already gotten a land from it. I'm going to draw a card off of it, and I just ensured that I would have a second green for Natural Order. So if he were to sweep here, I'm in great shape. I've got tons of mana and a pod with Natural Order in hand, plus I get to draw a card. So I am not worried about anything other than maybe Pernicious Deed, and even then he probably wouldn't have the mana to cast it. Instead he just plays Smokestack, Grand Coliseum, no problem. And a very nice top deck there, so Counterspell is pretty sweet. So because of the way I plan to run my turn out, I go ahead and cast Edric first and attack for a card. And now I can pot away that Solemn Simulacrum. He, having done his job, natural into a guy's cradle. This draw just keeps getting grosser and grosser. So I go ahead and float some mana, but I can actually afford to pay for the pod without paying life, which is amazing. So I go ahead and draw a card off Solemn, pod him away, and snag myself a Trinket Mage into a Solemn into a Hermit is just disgusting. And then because there's absolutely no reason, so I go ahead and cast Mana Vault. There's no reason to, I can recast Edric all day and I can pay for the Echo on Deranged Hermit. So normally if mana was tight, I would Natural Order away Deranged Hermit, but in this case, the right answer is to Natural Order Edric without doubt, and then next turn I'll go ahead and just recast him. So the only question at this point is, do I trust it on 2 of his permanents, these 2, and then say, I don't know, my Mana Crypt, for example, or my Mana Vault, or it doesn't matter. My opponent just gives up. I probably just hit all 3, and if I do hit all 3, it's a little bit harder for me to attack. Of course, he can't really attack me back, but it's not that much harder because I kill all three. He gets 3 elephants. He really can't swing into a Terastodon, and these guys here will. 2 of these will take down an elephant. 2 would take down an elephant. Terastodon would kill an elephant. So he can't really attack me. And then from there, it's kind of hard for me to attack him, but I just pod away. Pot away the. Oh, and by the way, I had thought that I was going to natural order the Edric. I actually natural order the Arbor, and I think it was because I was looking at paying the upkeep with Cradle and then how much mana it would take to recast Edric, and it seemed just better to me at that point to have him in play and pod him away and recast him rather than keeping the Arbor. So anyway, yeah. So I was going to pot away Edric there on the next turn, and most likely fetch Control Magic or a Glenelendra, and then from there, if I take Glenelendra, for example, he's not getting out. If I take Control Magic, I just take Control Magic, drop him to 2 elephants, start smashing with Terastodon, or even take Glenelendra and start hitting him with Terastodon, because what is he going to do? I mean, if he trades his 3 elephants with Terastodon, then my whole army starts hitting him, and if he doesn't, then he's eating 9 a turn, and I'm drawing 2 cards per turn. It's pretty much damned if you do, damned if you don't on that. So, all right, Zombie Links here. So, good start to the day. My opponent's playing Hazezon Tamar, and I have a great start. So I go ahead and win the dice roll, lead off with a Soul Ring of my own this time. And then this is a little weird. So do you play... so my options here are Opposition, Edric, Arbor Elf. If I play the Arbor Elf, he won't be summoning sick next turn, and the next turn I'll have 6 mana. And from there I could play Opposition or Edric, or I could play Opposition and attack with Arbor Elf. Edric and attack with Arbor Elf. So that's weird. If I play Opposition here, the next turn I could cast... Next turn I need to draw a Forest, but if I do, I could cast Edric Elf. If I don't, I only get to cast, say, Edric or Elf. I think those are 2 of the options, but I end up deciding to go with Edric instead, figuring next turn I'll just draw some extra cards, and if I draw a Forest or Island, I can play Arbor Elf Opposition Go. But he plays a blocker, so that plan is out. So I go ahead and instead just play Opposition now, and I will use Edric in a different fashion. I'll use him to tap a Forest. In response, he floats 3 mana and plays an interesting card. It's Natural Connection. So it is basically a Harrow that doesn't have the drawback of sacking a land and doesn't have the advantage of putting 2 untapped lands into the battlefield. So Harrow has the serious drawback against blue, but probably is a better card overall. However, if you were concerned you were going to face a lot of blue, or if you want some variety and you are looking for that effect, this looks like a pretty decent card. I imagine during the domain days, I would have played that card. So anyway, Opposition there. So I draw Copy Artifact, which is really nice because I'd much rather force with Copy than with the Muddle, because Muddle's a tutor. But because he tapped his Sylvan Caryatid there, I'm able to actually attack him and get another card. Just thinking about whether or not I want to imprint that Chrome Mox. But I could imprint Mox with like Muddle and then copy the Soul Ring, for example. But doing something like that means I can't cast Force of Will. So I just sit on the Mox. And then during his upkeep, tap some of his mana down. Cast Cultivate. I could Force, but the counter to Cultivate here is just going to be to draw a bunch of cards and just make his cards irrelevant. So that's what I plan to do. I'm about to attack and draw 3 extra cards, and then almost certainly transmute Muddle for Winter Orb, and then just lock his whole board down and win. He'll never get more than 3 mana this game. I'll have Chrome Mox to imprint the Copy Artifact under. So I just, even without seeing the next 3 cards, I would have the Chrome Mox imprint the copy, most likely, maybe holding it if I don't draw a blue card for Force of Will, but otherwise, yeah, down comes Winter Orb and it's game over. So he scoops it up, so that's no problem there. A lot of games with Edric, you'll notice, are like this, where my opponent just doesn't get to play. They just get valued, like outvalued so fast um, that. So this is my opponent's commander, by the way. That there's just no time for them to catch up. So I keep a risky keep and do not get. But I'm going second, so I have more chances for a land. Don't get one, and my opponent gets a Soul Ring. I do, however, get a Bloom Tender, which is a lot better than the turn 2 Expedition map attack you with my Arbor Elf plan. But then my opponent stumbles on mana, which is huge for me, and that stumble means I probably have plenty of time to develop. So I go ahead and play Trinket Mage over the Archdruid here. And the rationale for this is that I am concerned he could have some kind of Wrath of God effect. And if you were to play a Wrath of God effect, I want to get, if I were to have played Archdruid there and he Wrath, I'm in really bad shape. But by playing Trinket, if he Wraths, I've got 3 mana and I can just cast Chromatic Lantern and continue on, and then Lantern into a Mystical Tutor and continue on with my merry way there. So, matter of fact, if he Wrathed, I could have crypted the map and got Workshop and then played Shop, tap 3, cast Lantern, then have Mystical Tutor, and Shop would be producing mana. So anyway, my opponent just plays a Signet, and that is all the time he's going to get this game. So during my upkeep, I Mystical Tutor for Natural Order, and then pre-combat, I go ahead and cast Edric, attack him with Trinket Mage. Not drawing a Gaia's Cradle, I fetch one instead. And that is game over. I'm not going to sack a mana source here. Again, I'll just sack Edric and recast him next turn if my opponent doesn't concede. And boom, 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 out go the lights. So that was Sakashima, Sakura Rin. Alright, so this guy was playing a Dragon Lord Ojutai. And I have a sick draw. I'm not going first, which would make it even more disgusting, of course. But it's pretty gnarly that I can cast a turn 2 Tezzeret if I want to. But because I draw the Tree Speaker, I decide to alter that plan slightly. So instead I tap for 5 mana. I spend 3 into Edric and 2 into pumping up the Tree Speaker. So that way on turn 3, I can tap for 3, 5, 7, 8, 9 mana potentially. Cast Tezzeret if I want to. Tez can fetch me an additional couple of mana. So I have the potential to tap for roughly 11 mana next turn, possibly more. Also draw a card. So he's got Wrath mana up now, and so I just have to make this turn count. But first things first, I decide I'm going to actually send in Tezzeret. And because there's only one Wrath of God that I can't counter, and so I will take the risk that I can stop that. And instead of fetching Winter Orb here and trying to stall him out and hoping, hopefully he doesn't draw. Like if I fetch Winter Orb here and he untaps and he goes Mana Crypt Wrath, I'm in big trouble. So I decided that instead what I'll do is I'm going to get Tezzeret down, and I'm going to increase my mana base by even more. I'm going to put Sword of Feast and Famine on Edric, hit him with both creatures, draw 2 cards, dump a card from his hand, and then I can sit on the mana drain. And if he plays the uncounterable Wrath, I'm still in great shape because I'll be up 2 cards plus the mana drain. And then on the next turn, I've got plenty of mana with Tezzeret pumping the Crypt, for example, to make plays. So I think this made sense, and I guess my opponent agreed because he scooped it up pretty fast there. And I don't know, have we had a game that's gone past turn 5 here? I'm not sure that a single game has, but that's just the way this deck works. So I had a single land draw and then a no land draw, so I mulliganed twice into a no land draw, and it looks like this, and I decide I'm going to keep anyway, because the payout if I can draw a land or Chrome Mox or Mana Crypt, the payout is potentially huge. Of course, I do need colored mana, but I have so much mana if I can just draw one that I figure it's worth the risk. Plus I get to scry. So I scry and my top card is Strip Mine. So I put Strip Mine on top and I have to end my first turn by playing nothing. So turn one, go. Not even land go, just go. So turn two I get to Strip Mine Soul Ring. And now again, it's super risky. I mean, if he just went Vandal Blast or Soul Ring, I go, well, I guess next card better be a forest. But he does not. He plays Everflowing Chalice for one. And his commander, by the way, is Marchesa. So it's got some dethroned shenanigans. Creatures with counters on them pop back to life if Marchesa's in play. So like this creature's unkillable. And if you were to get, when do they pop back into play? The beginning of the next end step. Fortunately, not immediately. Otherwise, this plus an Arcbound, like an Arcbound Ravager and Marchesa would be infinite. But it is infinite. It's just infinite in a very slow way. So he plays Thespian Sage, and I figure that sucks. He's probably going to, I mean, if I were him, I would copy the Strip Mine to have it available for my next land drop since he knows I'm hurting on land badly. But instead, I'm pumping the fist. He played Coalition Relic, and I've got a colorless source of artifact mana right here. And draw a Sword of Fire and Ice, which is pretty nice there. So I actually copy his Coalition Relic with 1 mana floating, play my Bloom Tender, and strip his Highland. So he copies, oh no, he plays Drowned Catacomb, plays his commander as well, using the mana off the charge off of this, and hits me. So because he's been hitting me for damage, the dethrone effect of his commander is not adding counters to his attacking creatures. So half of his commander's ability doesn't even work here, which is nice. And so I draw Elvish Archdruid. This is one of those cases where I kind of wish that Elvish Archdruid was Elvish Wood Elves, but I don't think that it would make sense to pull Druid for Elves. It would make more sense to just find room for Wood Elves. At any rate, I decide, so I had a couple of ways I could go with this. So I could play Elvish Archdruid now, and then on the next turn I could use Archdruid and the Relic to cast Edric, which would mean this would tap for green and blue. I would have 1 floating after doing that. I would have 2 floating after doing that, and then I could 3, 4, 5, 6. So there's some kind of play where I like slowly get development and produce a lot of mana that way. But I decide that because I want to hit land drops most of all right now, I'm going to just go ahead and equip my Bloom Tender and hit him for damage. And now this is a little weird, but Dethrone triggers if we're equal in life. So here, take a look. When this attacks, the player with the most life or tied the most life put a +1/+1 counter on it, and all of his creatures have Dethrone. So I definitely can't afford to let that trigger. So I actually target his, and this thing comes back to life when it dies because of the Marchesa. So there's no sense in killing this with the sword, so I just deal 2 to this. Because if I hit him for 2, I'll drop in life. And I draw Nature's Claim, which is kind of nice because Claim will actually let me force him to gain extra life if I need to, in order to turn off the throne. And it also lets me hurt his mana base a little bit, which is, I think, important because he's got a scary amount of mana over there. I'm worried I'm going to get blown out by something like Vandal Blast, you know. And I top deck Thran Dynamo. So all this colorless mana, the Power Artifact, and the Thran Dynamo is actually really keeping me in this game. And I go ahead and get in with some more damage. Finally hit a land. Tuck a Mana Crypt to the bottom. Even though I need mana, I'm flush on colorless. I don't need that. And when he goes ahead and Thespian Sage to copy his Drowned Catacombs, charges his Relic, and then that's my key to go ahead and destroy the thing. First off, so that I can get another shot in with Bloom Tender if I need to. And secondly, just because I don't really want him to have black for Necropotence. I don't really want him to have double blue very easily. You know, 4 sources of blue, so he could do something like cast a Jace and then cast a counter spell. I mean, I don't know what's going on over there, but pinching his mana looked really good here. And he during his upkeep, he goes ahead and uses Academy Ruins to put the artifact on top of his deck, and then doesn't have a land to go with it, which makes no sense at all. But I'm fine with him making no sense at this point. So I go ahead and finally cast my commander, or think about casting him. Decide against, actually, yeah. Cast Elvish Archdruid. That's right. Move the sword over for safety's sake and play Llanowar Elf. So the reason I don't play the commander here is that these two cards have summoning sickness, so I want to get them down. I want to get them down now, and then I can play the commander next turn, and then Bloom Tundra will immediately tap for an additional mana. Or I can use, his ability on the offense. So I'm trying to maximize the most mana that I have available to use between now and the next turn. And so I have to give my opponent like one turn to do something here, obviously, but at least now, if my opponent Vandal Blasts me, for example, I would still be well in this game. I could easily recover from that because the Archdruid taps for 3 right now. This would be a blue. I could tap for 3 and a blue, cast my commander. This would then tap for 2, and this would tap for 1. So I have, even without the artifacts, I've got, depending on the order, and the Archdruid also triggers on the commander. So depending on the order that I were to play my cards in, I have the potential to draw a land, cast like Edric, using green, blue, and green, for example, or blue, green, and green. Tap for 5, 7. So there's a ton of potential here, even if I get blasted out with a Vandal Blast. So that's why I developed that way. On the other hand, if my opponent were to sweep the board with a gigantic earthquake or something, then not only would this guy live, the one that I most care about, but I also have obviously a gallon of mana. In fact, strangely enough, I didn't play a land on my first turn, skipped my entire first turn. The only land I got was a Strip Mine. I finally got a Temple, which came into play tapped, so I haven't even used it yet, or just barely gotten to use it. And yet, if you compare our mana base situation, he's got 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I've got a total of 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, possibly 10, 11. The single tap for 4 if my commander's out. So 12, 13, 14, possibly 15, 16, possibly 17. So I have somewhere in the neighborhood of roughly 15 to 18 mana. And I draw a land. So +1. So absolutely just an insane amount. And so because I drew that, I don't even have to tap any creatures in order to cast my commander. And what's beautiful about it is with the Thran Dynamo and the Worn Powerstone mana, I actually have just enough to cast Rift right here, clear out his guys. I'm going to smash him with all 3 guys. I'm going to draw 4 cards, do 2 to the face, and then I feel like I'm in a pretty good spot from there. My opponent agrees and completely gives up. So he would have been shut down to just 4 mana sources. It would have taken a while for him to redevelop. He could have played Chalice for 2. I mean, on his next turn, the best thing he could do is draw a land, right? Play a land, cast Chalice for 2, Relic, Arcbound Worker. I mean, and does that get him anywhere? No, because he's gonna have to chump with it, chump the guy with a sword on it. And obviously, like at that point, I win the game, having drawn 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 cards and this much mana. So I thought that was a really cool game because I played the entire game. I mean, you saw how it started, right? 0 land keep. Just turns out to be amazing, and I think part of it can be attributed to the fact that I've built this deck with the kind of big mana variety, with that mixture of creature and artifact ramp. It allows me to win games where I'm mana shy. And of course, if I had drawn either of the newest cards, Simic Signet or Solemn Simulacrum, that start would have been much, much better. I mean, I would have been able to go Soul Ring into like Power Stone as I did, play the Solemn and get things running, or play the Signet and do something with that. So So I think it makes a lot of sense in a deck with this much colorless to run colorless sources of mana that will fix my colored mana problems. So still wish I could figure out how to put Wood Elves in here. Still not entirely sure that I see any way to do it. Every single card in here is just so so synergistic with what the deck is trying to do that it's exceptionally hard to come up with a slot for something like that. But I am always open to your thoughts. So definitely give suggestions if you think you see a way to fit Wood Elves, or if you think maybe the card doesn't belong in here. Either way, let me know, and we'll take a look at it. So that's all I've got for now. We're still moving into our place, so we've got a lot of work to do. But I just wanted to take a pause and do a video for you guys, and then I will do the video from yesterday's games with the slightly older version next, because that was something like 20 games. I think I'll do yesterday's, or maybe I'll just start some new ones, or maybe I'll just target the one or two that really stood out from yesterday. I don't know, but there'll be something good coming, I promise. And that's all I've got. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.